What if I told you? The most dangerous secret of Harlem was never about drugs, money, or murder, but about a room even Bumpy Johnson was afraid to enter. They called him the King of Harlem. His real name was Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. On the streets, people feared his gun. In prison, men feared his silence. But inside Harlem, there was a rumor that never made it to police files, never reached newspapers, never even reached the mafia bosses who worked with him. Old people whispered it in barbershops. Musicians hinted at it in broken lyrics. And prostitutes swore they had seen Bumpy do something no gangster would ever do: walk away from power. Because every time someone mentioned one specific building near 133rd Street, Bumpy's face changed. Not anger, not fear, something colder. Witnesses said he would stop talking, put down his drink, and leave without explanation. That building had no gang, no drugs,
no gambling den,
just a locked room on the top floor that Bumpy paid for, protected, but never used. At least that's what everyone thought. In 1938, a small-time numbers runner named Caleb Voss disappeared after bragging in a Harlem club. He said, "Bumpy ain't Harlem's king. He's guarding something, and I know where it is." That was the last night anyone saw Caleb alive. No blood, no body, no police report. But 3 days later, a janitor working in that same mysterious building told his wife something that made her faint. He said he heard crying coming from the locked top floor. Not a woman, not a child, a grown man, begging, and repeating only one sentence: "Bumpy, you promised it would never wake up." The janitor quit the same night, burned his clothes, and left New York forever. From that year onward, something changed about Bumpy Johnson. He became richer, more powerful, more untouchable, but also more careful. He stopped killing personally. He stopped visiting certain clubs. And once every month, always at night, he went alone to that building. No bodyguards, no driver, just him, and a locked door no one else ever opened. So the real question is not how many men Bumpy Johnson killed. In Harlem, power usually comes from fear. But Bumpy Johnson's power came from something else. Something older. Something that didn't care about guns. The building on 133rd Street wasn't always empty. In 1924, long before Bumpy became a king, it was owned by a German immigrant named Otto Keller, a silent man who never socialized, never drank, never laughed. But people noticed strange things. Animals refused to go near the building. Milk spoiled faster inside. And tenants complained about the same dream: a narrow room, no windows, and something breathing behind the walls. In 1927, police were called after a woman jumped from the 3rd floor screaming, "It knows my name." Inside her apartment, officers found every mirror turned toward the wall, except one, and on it, written backward, in something dark, "Let me finish what you started." The case was closed as hysteria. 3 months later, Otto Keller disappeared. The building went silent, until Bumpy Johnson bought it in 1936. Bumpy didn't buy it through lawyers. He paid in cash. And witnesses said before the papers were signed, he demanded one thing: "I want whatever's in the top room left exactly as it is." The real estate agent laughed, until Bumpy slid a photo across the table. A photo never published. A police evidence picture from 1927 of a door, scratched from the inside, with human fingernails. The agent's hands started shaking. The deal closed in 5 minutes. The first time Bumpy opened that door was not alone. It was with a man named Dr. Harold Green, a disgraced psychologist fired from Bellevue Hospital for conducting unethical sleep experiments. Green believed some minds didn't break. They opened, and behind them something waited. Green entered the room at 11:40 p.m. Bumpy waited outside. At 12:02 a.m., screaming started. Not pain, not fear, recognition. Green ran out bleeding from the ears, whispering again and again, "It's not trapped, it's being fed." He was committed 2 weeks later. Before losing his speech completely, he wrote one final sentence on his cell wall with his own fingernails. "Johnson is not the owner. He is the doorman." After that night, Bumpy changed the rules. No one entered. No one even cleaned that floor. And anyone who tried to investigate that building lost everything. Jobs, families, sanity, or simply vanished. Now remember the numbers runner, Caleb Voss, who bragged he knew Bumpy's real secret. Here is the part never recorded. Caleb didn't threaten Bumpy. He begged him. Witnesses inside the club heard him cry, "You said it would only take memories, not faces, not voices." Bumpy didn't touch him, didn't threaten him. He just said one sentence, "I told you never to go near the door when it's awake." Caleb was seen walking out with Bumpy, calm, silent, alive. He never came back. But 2 weeks later, something did. A man walked into a Harlem church during Sunday service. His clothes were Caleb's. His face was not. And when people screamed and ran, the thing only asked one question in Caleb's voice. "Which one of you belongs to him now?" And that was the first time Bumpy Johnson was ever seen praying. Not in church, but alone, outside a locked room. 2:17 in the morning. The police never found that church report. The priest disappeared that same year. And the building on 133rd Street was officially removed from housing records in 1941. On paper, it no longer existed, but Bumpy kept paying for it, every month, in cash, even after prison, even after the mafia, even after Harlem itself began to change. Because according to the last man who ever followed him there, the door sometimes knocked back. What Bumpy really paid. Everyone thinks Bumpy Johnson built his empire with bullets. That's a lie. Bullets were only how he kept it. What he paid was much worse. In 1935, before the Italians ever respected him, before Harlem bowed to him, Bumpy was running small numbers and protection. He was powerful, but not untouchable. 3 different crews wanted him dead. One of them nearly succeeded. On a rainy night near the Harlem River, Bumpy was ambushed. 2 shots hit him. One in the shoulder, one in the stomach. The men who shot him were never found. But here's the part history never explained. Bumpy was officially recorded as missing for 9 days. Not in a hospital. Not in police custody. Not in hiding. Missing. When he returned, his wounds were gone. No stitches. No scars. Only a long burn-like mark around his left wrist. As if something had once been locked there. According to a former associate who spoke before his death, Bumpy didn't go into hiding those 9 days. He was carried into the building on 133rd Street, to the top floor, to the locked room, the room no doctor would enter. That associate said Bumpy later confessed something while drunk. It doesn't heal you, it replaces you. Inside that room, Bumpy made a deal. Not for money, not for power, for time. More years, more control, more survival. But the payment was not immediate. It was delayed. Installments. After that, anyone who seriously tried to kill Bumpy suffered strange endings. A shooter was found in his apartment, seated at his table, with a gun in his mouth. But ballistics proved he had not fired. A rival boss collapsed in the street, screaming that his mother was calling him from inside his chest. Doctors found nothing wrong. He died 6 hours later. Another man walked into a police station and calmly said, "Tell Johnson it already knows all my dreams." Then he bit his own tongue off. Bumpy started keeping notebooks, not accounts, not business, names, dates, and one word beside each. Paid. He stopped sleeping normally. When he did sleep, people said he sat upright, sometimes talking, sometimes answering questions no one asked. Once, his girlfriend at the time ran out of his apartment barefoot into the snow. All she said was, "He isn't alone when he closes his eyes." She was institutionalized by mourning. But the worst sign came in 1954, when Bumpy's most loyal enforcer, a man who had taken bullets for him, broke into the 133rd Street building while Bumpy was in prison. He went looking for the truth. What police found inside shook even hardened detectives. The top floor had no furniture, no dust, no windows, only handprints, thousands of them, on the walls, on the ceiling, on the inside of the door, all overlapping, all facing inward, as if something had been pressed against them from the other side. In the center of the room was one object, Bumpy's missing notebook, open. On the last page, written in fresh ink, one remains. The enforcer was never found. But after that day, Bumpy was heard saying something new, not to his men, not to his enemies, but to empty rooms. I'm running out of names. And from then on, people around him didn't just die. They changed. Men who survived attempts on Bumpy started forgetting who they were, forgetting families, forgetting faces, forgetting how mirrors worked. One of them tore every reflective surface out of his house, screaming, "It's learning me, the room that isn't a room." By the late 1950s, Bumpy Johnson was feared across New York. But inside his own circle, a new rumor replaced the old ones. They said Bumpy no longer trusted walls, because walls had started listening. One winter night, during a private card game, the power went out. No storm, no blackout, just gone. In the dark, the men heard something moving inside the apartment. Not footsteps, pages turning, slow. Bit. When the lights returned, Bumpy was standing alone. The other three men were gone. No doors opened, no windows broken. Only one thing remained on the table, a single playing card, the King of Spades, with a fingerprint pressed into it. From the wrong side, Bumpy canceled the game forever. That same year, a city inspector secretly assigned to audit non-existent properties reached the 133rd Street building. His notes were later recovered from his briefcase, found floating in the Harlem River. Page 1. The top floor does not align with the lower floors. Page 2. The hallway is longer inside than outside. Page 3. I can hear breathing through the paint. Final page. The room is not a place. It is a condition. He never came home. What Bumpy finally admitted to one priest, who disappeared 3 weeks later, was this: the locked room did not exist until someone stayed in it long enough. Formed around them like a wound closing. Inside, there were no corners, no clear walls, just layers of memories, of voices, of faces that felt almost like your own. And something at the center, not a body, pattern, a moving absence that learned by being looked at. Bumpy said the first time he truly saw it, it wore his mother's voice. The second time, it wore his childhood friend's eyes. The third time, it wore his, perfectly, smiling back, but speaking words he hadn't thought yet. From then on, mirrors became dangerous to him. He covered them, smashed them, paid to have them removed from every place he lived. Because reflections sometimes moved late, sometimes early, and sometimes they didn't copy him at all. The building on 133rd Street began to attract people. Runaways, drunks, lost men. They said it felt warm inside. Familiar, safe. Those people were never reported missing, because officially, they were never there. And then, in 1963, Bumpy Johnson made the worst mistake of his life. He tried to change the deal. He brought someone to the door, not to pay, but to listen. A young boy from Harlem, prodigy, a boy who claimed he could hear thoughts. Bumpy believed the thing in the room could be trapped, controlled, fed lies instead of lives. The door was opened. The boy stepped in. He didn't scream. He laughed and said, "It's been waiting for you to bring me yourself." The door closed. The building shook. And for the first time in 30 years, Bumpy Johnson ran. From that night on, he aged fast. His hands shook. He forgot names, sometimes even his own. Sometimes he stared at people and whispered, "You're not finished yet." What came back? 3 days after the boy entered the room, the door opened. Not fully, just enough. People across the street heard crying, then laughter, then both at the same time. When the building manager finally forced himself upstairs hours later, the hallway was warm. Not heated, alive warm. The door stood open. The room inside was empty. No imprints, no walls, just a faint smell of iron and old paper. And in the center of the floor was the boy, standing, unhurt, smiling. But he did not blink. Not once. The manager said when he asked the boy if he was okay. The boy answered in a voice far too deep for his throat. "He doesn't need the door anymore." The manager jumped from the stairs. He survived, but never spoke again. The boy was returned to Harlem. His family said he was different. He knew things no child could. He finished sentences before they were spoken. He described rooms he had never entered. He drew the same image again and again. A man made of doors, and inside every door. And I, Bumpy, tried to have the boy killed. Every attempt failed. Guns jammed. Knives slipped. One man who raised a pistol against the boy shot himself instead. Another walked into traffic smiling. Bumpy finally understood. The thing no longer needed a room. It had learned to walk. From then on, Bumpy started seeing the boy everywhere. In reflections. In crowds. Sometimes sitting in chairs that were empty a second before. Always watching. Always patient. Always older. And then came 1968. The restaurant. Wells. The place where history says Bumpy Johnson died of a heart attack. What history never recorded was this. The waitress took his order. Coffee, toast, eggs. She turned away. When she turned back, Bumpy was already pale, staring at the empty seat across from him. Lips shaking, she leaned closer and heard him whisper, "I brought you time. I brought you names. I brought you lives. Please, don't make me the last door." His hand reached out, not to his chest, but forward, as if touching someone else's face. Then he smiled, not in fear, in recognition, and fell. The coroner wrote heart failure. But the man who cleaned the table later told his son something before dying. There were 2 cups of coffee, one still warm. After Bumpy's funeral, the building on 133rd Street was finally entered by the city. They found nothing. No room, no top floor. The building ended exactly where blueprints said it should. As if something had folded itself away. Satisfied. But in Harlem, years later, a boy was arrested for assault. In the holding cell, he scratched one sentence into the paint. "One remains." When asked what it meant, he said, "The man who opened the first door is still paying, through all of you." And that brings us to now. Because the thing Bumpy fed didn't want Harlem, didn't want power, didn't even want him. It wanted what he had access to. Lives, names, stories, and doors. The first door. Before there was a building, before there was Harlem, before there was even Bumpy Johnson, there was a man who tried to escape himself. His name has been erased. Not forgotten. Erased. He lived in New York in 1891. A locksmith. A specialist in vaults, prison doors, secret rooms. The kind of man rich people hired when they wanted something hidden so well even God couldn't find it. But this man didn't build a door to lock something out. He built one to lock something in. Himself. Police reports from that year describe a strange call. Neighbors complained of constant knocking from inside his shop after midnight. When officers arrived, the shop was empty. No signs of struggle. No forced entry. Just one new object in the center of the floor. A door frame, standing by itself. No walls. No hinges. Just a frame. And through it, darkness. Not shadow. Depth. An officer named Thomas Heller reached through it. He said it felt like touching the inside of his own skull. He screamed, pulled back, and on his palm were words pressed into the skin. Backward, opened. Heller was institutionalized for the rest of his life. Before he lost language, he repeated one sentence again and again. He didn't build a door. He built a direction. What the locksmith had done, what Bumpy would later inherit, was not summon something. He created a condition, a way for the mind to fold inward far enough that it met something already there. Not a demon, not a ghost, a remainder, the part left behind when identity finishes. The shop burned down 2 weeks later, but people kept dreaming of doors, standing alone, in rooms that didn't exist, and sometimes they woke up tired, as if they had been used. The door reappeared in different places over decades. A monastery in Quebec, a mine in Pennsylvania, a hospital basement in New Jersey, always after someone obsessed over isolation, over control, over disappearing without dying. Each time a room formed, each time people went missing, each time something came back thinner, smarter, closer to human. Otto Keller found it in 1924. He didn't understand it. He worshipped it. He fed it animals, then people, then himself. By the time Bumpy bought the building, Keller was not gone. He was layered, spread through the room like fingerprints through wet paint. The thing Bumpy met was not one being. It was an accumulation of men who tried to hide from themselves. That is why it wore familiar faces, why it spoke in remembered voices, why it couldn't leave at first. It was made of rooms, and rooms need doors, and doors need men like Bumpy, which is why when the boy came out, the room vanished, because the room was never the container. It was the training ground. The thing had learned enough. It no longer needed architecture, only access. After 1968, cases like Bumpy's began appearing in records across the country. Men who rose too fast, who survived too much, who should not have. Men who said strange things before dying. Men whose associates changed. Men around whom rooms felt wrong. And in several sealed FBI psychological files, a term begins to appear in the 1970s. Not a name, a classification. Threshold predation. The idea that some intelligences do not hunt bodies. They hunt transitions, moments between, doorways, reflections, sleep, stories. Because every time you hear a story like this, you open something, just a little, the contagion. In the late 1970s, something strange began showing up in FBI behavioral archives. Not cases, patterns. They noticed certain crime stories did something to people. Not inspire violence, not fear, attachment. People didn't just read them, they returned to them, obsessed, collected them, dreamed them, and one name appeared again and again in reports connected to psychological breakdowns, identity dissociation, and shared hallucinations. Bumpy Johnson, a federal analyst named Marion Klein, was assigned to study why. She wasn't interested in his murders or his empire. She studied something else, the way people described him after deep exposure, not as a man, but as a space. Interview subjects used the same phrases without knowing each other. He feels like a hallway. He's like a door you don't remember opening. When I think about him too long, I feel watched from behind my face. Klein pulled every unreleased file on Bumpy. Prison psych evaluations, medical notes, interrogation recordings. In one sealed prison interview from 1951, Bumpy is asked a simple question. Who are you afraid of? He laughs, then stops, then answers. The ones who don't need to threaten me anymore. When asked what that meant, the audio degrades, but the transcript ends with one intact sentence. It likes the way stories loosen people. Klein compared this with modern reports. People who became deeply obsessed with Bumpy's life began reporting the same experiences. Dreams of unfamiliar rooms, hearing knocking before sleep, a mirror's feeling delayed, of the sense of being observed from inside. One graduate student studying organized crime disappeared in 1982. Her apartment was intact, but her thesis draft remained open on her desk. The last written line, "He is not the subject. He is the entry point." Klein eventually formed a private theory that whatever passed through Bumpy Johnson did not leave with him. It distributed, thinly, across attention, across repetition, across narrative. Every retelling shaved it closer to mobility, closer to independence, closer to us. She wrote in a sealed memo, "Some ideas are not ideas. They are habitats." Shortly after submitting that memo, Marion Klein was found wandering in Union Station in Washington, D.C. She did not know her name. She did not recognize faces. She only repeated one sentence, calmly, for 6 straight hours. "You don't need a door, if someone is already listening." She now lives in a private neurological care facility. Her room contains no mirrors,
No reflective surfaces.
no doors that fully close. The FBI project was shut down, files buried, cases relabeled, but one detail couldn't be erased. Across unrelated incidents in different states, over decades, the same phrase appears scratched, written, whispered, or recorded by people who had no contact with each other. One remains, and here is the part never shared publicly. In 2007, during production of American Gangster, a consultant requested access to sealed Harlem files. He was granted partial clearance. 2 weeks later, he quit the project, burned his notes, and told a friend one thing before cutting all contact. They never found Bumpy's last notebook, but people keep rewriting it, because in Klein's final unsubmitted report, there is a paragraph marked "Do Not Archive." It reads, "The phenomenon no longer requires physical locations. It now displays narrative-based propagation. Exposure without closure increases susceptibility, especially in individuals seeking power, fear, or hidden knowledge. Which brings us to you, not as a threat, as a pattern. You didn't ask about Bumpy's crimes. You didn't ask about his empire. You asked for a story no one had been told. And that is exactly where it prefers to live,